Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel, and welcome to the 40 subscriber special. We made it. Thank you guys so much for 40 subs. Enough subs to get ourselves a full main deck. And as promised, I'm here to deliver to you my Yu-Gi-Oh! History. Essentially, I'm just going to take a look back at my life and how this wonderful game has affected it, and how it's gotten me to where I am today, sort of as a content creator and as a person. That being said, this video is going to be very different than the rest of my content. There will be gameplay in the background, but it's mostly just going to be personal stories, me talking about things, and just kind of giving you my take on Yu-Gi-Oh! Throughout my life. So if that's not something you're interested in, that's perfectly fine. Go check out some of my other videos. We just uploaded a really funny Left 4 Dead video the other day, actually earlier today as of recording this. Check out whatever you guys want to. But if you guys, aren't too interested in this kind of content, that's perfectly okay. That being said, though, before we actually get into the actual meat and potatoes of the video, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this. So this is a video about how Yu-Gi-Oh! Has affected my life. And none of that would be possible without this man right here. Kazuki Takahashi, creator of Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm sure everyone who's here knows him. Everybody who's here loves him. A legend, absolutely. And I cannot thank this man enough. This game has been such a huge part of my life, as we're about to find out, and it wouldn't have been possible without him. So, rest in peace, Kazuki Takahashi. Thank you so much for everything you've given, not only me, but the community who loves this game so much. You are him. You are the legend. So, thank you very much, and rest in peace, Kazuki Takahashi. With that all being said, though, I'm going to go ahead and bring up the gameplay. This is going to be Duel Links in the background. New event just dropped, so we're just going to be doing that while I talk about things. I'm not going to talk about the game so much. I may talk a little bit about it here and there, but it's mostly just going to be auto-dueling with some characters I need to get gems with. Alright. And if you guys were still here by this point, let's get right into it. So, where do I start? I guess at the beginning, when I first saw Yu-Gi-Oh! As a child. I was very little, very small, so I don't really recall too much about, that time period, but I do remember the first time I saw Yu-Gi-Oh! I was in my bedroom watching TV, and, it's the episode that everybody remembers, the very first episode of the Duelist Kingdom arc, Yugi dueling Kaiba losing to Exodia, and I was just absolutely hooked. I thought that show was so cool. So I started watching it more and more, things like that. I got my mom to pick up some action figures and things that they were releasing at the time. Really wish I still had some of those. They were really cool. Like Exodia, I had the Exodia. Like I said, I had what's the guy's name? The Rude Kaiser, the big lizard guy with the axe arms. I had some little smaller figurines with Yugi, and I had one of Horn Imp, things like that. A lot of fun stuff. I loved those, but I didn't actually start playing the card game until much later on. So I had gone out to Walmart with my dad and saw, Yu-Gi-Oh! Packs. It was LOB or something like that. I can't remember. I think it was LOB. And I was like, hey, I want that. I got a single pack of LOB and got some cards there. And I didn't know what any of them did. I just loved them. I thought they were the coolest thing ever. And so that was when I picked up my first little bit of cards. I don't actually have a single one of those cards to this day. Again, I really wish that I did, but they ended up being lost to time, and I don't exactly have them anymore, which is unfortunate. So fast forward a little bit, I'm getting a bunch of cards, you know, starting to collect them, starting to build decks. Obviously, I'm modeling my deck after, like, Yugi and Kaiba and Joey and all the main characters from the DM era. My favorite card was Blue Eyes. I'm sure it was most of your guys' favorite card back in the day, too. You know, I really still like Blue Eyes to this day, even though it's not my favorite archetype or my favorite card anymore. I do still quite enjoy Blue Eyes, and that's more or less what I built my deck around. Some of you guys may remember from back in the day, if you're, you know, old like me and you played Yu-Gi-Oh back then, you would get like these fake cards that were like really like shiny and neat looking, but they had like the complete wrong name for the card and like text that just made no sense. And I had a bunch of those, and I thought they were fun and that sort of thing back then. And so that's when I first started to like grow and cultivate my love of the game when I was younger. And I was just learning things and just kind of going off of the anime and things like that. And then a few more years later, the GX era started. And I'm not too good with like dates and things like that as I'm recalling this. So I'm just going to go by like Yu-Gi-Oh eras roughly for like when I'm talking about things. Moving forward. So I get to roughly the GX era, and this is around the time that my younger brother is getting old enough to like learn to play the game. So obviously you give him a kind of crappy deck compared to yours, so you could always win because you know what you're doing, you teach him the game, that sort of thing. You know, you want to win, you want to feel good. I don't know, maybe that was just me as a kid. But I you know, taught my brother the game, and we would play it. He was sort of like the Yugi to my Kaiba almost, except I was winning frequently, like I said, but he played Dark Magician, I played Blue Eyes a lot. And we would go on to collect more things as they would come out. I very vividly remember getting my first PS2 back in the day, my first console, and getting the first game I got was Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, The Beginning of Destiny. Those of you who know from watching my Yu-Gi-Oh! GX Tag Force videos, it's the same game, but for PS2, and that's why I ended up playing it first on my channel, is because it was the first like Yu-Gi-Oh! Game that I ever played, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a big part of my life, of course, as you know we're talking about here, and that was the first game that I ever played on the PlayStation 2, like the first game that was mine, because I had like borrowed my friends' consoles, you know, or went to their houses, whatever, to play their stuff when I was a kid, and that was the first game I ever played on PS2. I would go on to get a GameCube, like, as a hand-me-down later on, and I played Yu-Gi-Oh! The False-Bound Kingdom. Maybe that's a game I'll play in the future on the channel if you guys are interested. You know, much later on, I would get, like, Capsule Monster Coliseum, all of these little things. You know, playing all these fun, like, Yu-Gi-Oh! Games, mostly, like, spin-offs or, like, whatever. And you know, that was when the love truly like blossomed for the game. It was like you have all this stuff, you know, you have all these games, you have the cards, you know, you got someone to play the game with. I would play at school a lot with some of my friends. Back in that time, Playground Yu-Gi-Oh! Was still pretty big, and that sort of thing. It was a great time to be a kid, you know, with Yu-Gi-Oh! And so, moving on a little bit from the GX era into the Synchro era, you know, the 5Ds era. 5Ds is where it's where my love sort of became like I don't want to say an obsession, but like more akin to like this was probably one of the biggest parts of my life, if not the biggest part of my life at that point. I loved Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. It's still my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh! Series to this day. It has some of my favorite characters and cards. This is when my deck sort of became less Blue Eyes oriented and more focused on synchros and things like that. So I loved Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D specifically at that time period. And so I was homeschooled at the time due to like some kind of zoning issue, where I was like kicked out of the elementary school that I had went my entire life, and I ended up being homeschooled for a year. So I spent a lot more time with my brother, who was also being homeschooled, because if you got to keep me home, you might as well keep him home, right? To homeschool us both, and so we played a lot more Yu-Gi-Oh and everything. And I had this little, like dream to like be like the characters in the anime, like go to these big tournaments and win, win prize money and just be this great duelist and all this other stuff. Obviously, I think we all have been there, right? I was still young, like 10 years old, 11 years old, stuff like that. I didn't really know what the Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitive scene was like or anything like that at the time. Like I said, I was homeschooled, so I was a little bit sheltered at that point in my life, and so it was, just a nice time to imagine and dream. And so that was that. And then towards like the middle to the end of the synchro era, my life would change forever. And that was when it was 2012, I recall at this point, because this is a very big turning point in my life. At that point, my mother would pass away, and I would have to move in with my dad, which I mentioned my dad briefly earlier. Didn't live with him, lived with my mom, saw my dad whenever, all that good stuff. And, as heartbreaking as that was, going through that, I had Yu-Gi-Oh! and Pokemon too. Pokemon is another huge part. Maybe later, much later down the line, we'll talk about Pokemon in a video similar to this. But I had Yu-Gi-Oh! And Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a big outlet for me. I would collect cards, play the game, absolutely adored it. Around this time, I would get even more cards and build my deck even more, and just build my collection up. Here, living with my dad at that point in time, and so that was sort of when I kind of became like this Yu-Gi-Oh! Like purist, almost like Yu-Gi-Oh! Elitist, almost like a Yu-Gi boomer. We call them now. I love the older style of Yu-Gi-Oh! Even like Synchros and back was what was for me, at that time period. And I built decks and stuff. I was having a lot of fun with it. And, I was still playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Every now and again. Middle school was a little bit different because everybody was trying to be cool in middle school, of course. I've been the same, like, nerdy me for, like, my entire life. I've just gotten like more mature, but I'm still the same nerdy kid that would sit at home and watch Yu-Gi-Oh! And dream of, being a champion at heart, really, nowadays. But besides that, I didn't play it as much, but my love was like huge for the game. It was one of my two biggest outlets for keeping me sort of in. I don't want to keeping me sane. I kind of want to say, but I don't. It was a hard time in my life, essentially, middle school and that in grade school and stuff. Like the end of my grade school, like 5th grade year into middle school. And Yu-Gi-Oh! Really helped me through that. And I don't think I would be as well adjusted as I am if I didn't have that. If I didn't have Yu-Gi-Oh! To like kind of throw myself into, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, of course, to throw myself into and sort of like help me in that time. And so at the end of my 5th grade year, when I talked about becoming a Yu-Gi-Oh! Purist, at the end of my 5th grade year, that's when Xyz came out. And that's when, Zexal was flooding in and everything. And now, like, at this point in time, I love Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal for what it is. My favorite character in the whole series is Kite Tenjo, but at the time I really couldn't stand it. I don't know why. I think younger me was like, Xyz, and it's kind of funny because there's an Xyz deck in the video right now that I've been playing this entire time. But I was like, Xyz, these are weird. They don't even have the stars on the right side of the card. What's going on here? This is dumb. I don't like it. And so I took a hiatus from the game between that time, like playing it. I would collect cards every now and again. Just if there's something cool that I liked. Maybe some like older archetype that I enjoyed would get like new support, that sort of thing. I would pick up a couple cards here and there, but it was nothing crazy. And so my middle school year, we would play every now and then, but I wouldn't use the new cards. I would just use my synchros, my fusions, even rituals in some case I would play in my deck every now and again. And it was during my middle school year where I kind of got my first Yu-Gi-Oh! Wake-up call. So, like I said, I used to be a bit of a Yu-Gi boomer type person, and I thought I was really good at the game. I was playing like beatdown Kaiba style, decks, and I could beat my friends who didn't know the game that well, or my acquaintances that didn't know the game that well, and I was just kind of casual in my enjoyment of the game at the time. That being said, there was someone else that went to my middle school who played the game a lot, almost as much as I did, if not more, probably more. And he knew a whole lot more about the game. And so he was like a year above me in school, and I would talk to him every now and again. But he would never bring his deck to school. He didn't want it. He's like, I don't want my cards to get taken, and yada yada yada. And I was like, it can't be that bad. You can't have that like expensive cards, right? He had some of the best cards like accessible at the time. I guess he had the more ready access to these kinds of things than I did. Growing up, I wasn't exactly the richest child or anything like that, or my family wasn't rich, I should say. And so he had access to these cards, and we dueled one time before this big realization came to me. And watching him duel was completely different than anything I had seen up to that point, and as far as like Yu-Gi-Oh goes, right? I got hosed. Like, I couldn't do anything against this man. I was getting my ass beat. And by the end of that duel, I maybe did 500 damage to him, if that. I don't even remember. But I barely touched him. And so I was like, damn, what did I do wrong? I've got all these high attack point cards and all these really good DM staples in my deck. Like, what was wrong? And he proceeded to teach me more about how it doesn't necessarily matter how strong your monsters are attack point wise, they have really good effects and things. And that was when I took my first step into like more competitive quote unquote Yu-Gi-Oh, to where I learned the game at a level that was beyond playground beatdown. And that was sort of my first step into shedding this Yu-Gi boomer like mentality and getting more familiar with cards that are more newer and relevant to the current formats and things of that nature. And so moving on from that into like my freshman year of high school, all that stuff. I didn't play Yu-Gi-Oh! In person as much anymore. By that time, I had sort of like started playing on, I want to call it Dueling Book, but it wasn't Dueling Book back then. It was Dueling Network, I think was what it was called. There's like been whole videos on Dueling, I think it's Dueling Network and all that good stuff. It's what Dueling Book would eventually become later. You guys probably know what I'm talking about. I would play on there every now and then, but it was still like, very rudimentary decks. I hadn't quite learned to deck build yet. But this would all change when I watched this one YouTube video. It was by a content creator who wasn't even a Yu-Gi-Oh content creator, funnily enough. Um, Mystic Umbreon, who still makes videos to this very day, still a very great content creator. If you guys don't know who he is, you know, he's a Pokemon creator. He's really good, really great. If you guys haven't heard of him, go check him out. He's fantastic, 1,000 times larger channel than me. So if you know who I am and you don't know who he is, I don't know. There's not much I can do for you. But he got sponsored by Amino, and you know, the Amino apps, and I was like, yeah, you know, this sounds kind of cool. You know, I could get on there and talk to people who have the same interests as me. That sounds like fun. And so I would join the Pokemon Amino, mess around on the Pokemon Amino for a little while, because like I said, Pokemon was another one of the huge influences in my life, just as big, if not bigger than Yu-Gi-Oh, depending on how you would look at it. But I would join a couple Yu-Gi-Oh Aminos, and it's cringe. I'm gonna warn you guys. The next couple words that are about to come out of my mouth are gonna be really cringe. So brace yourselves. But it was through Amino that I learned, like, roleplay, quote unquote, right? Like, you get in there and you play as a character. You act out whatever, make your OC, whatever you want to do. And I still like to make OCs to this day. As a result of this, I'll mostly make them for the D&D campaigns that I'm a part of and things like that. The tabletop campaigns, I guess I should say. And I would make characters and join Aminos and talk to people and, you know, play a little bit of Yu-Gi-Oh here and there. During this time, though, I was still very much, like, hard-headed when it came to Yu-Gi-Oh. I didn't fully shed my Yu-Gi Boomer views, because around this time we were getting into the Pendulum era, and I was still on my, like, big hiatus from the game, where I, like, didn't pay attention to anything that was going on outside of, like, playing a couple casual games and doing my little role plays on Amino. I didn't like actually play Yu-Gi-Oh. It was like I was playing for fun and with, like, my old decks and things like that. And I thought pendulums were stupid. Honestly, I still don't really like pendulums that much to this day, but I understand them now and I'm willing to play them. But back then I hated them, didn't like them, didn't want to play with them, and on a whim, I watched an episode of the Arc 5 anime and actually ended up quite liking it and learned how pendulums worked, but like I said, I didn't really play them or anything like that. Didn't really like the mechanic that much. Again, still don't to this day, but you know, I played them a little bit. And during this time frame is when I made my first, like, breakthrough, I want to say, with the game, where I would sort of get better with deck building and, like, actually start to play again. And yeah, I count this as the time my hiatus officially ended. The hiatus that I took towards the end of the Xyz era and stopped, like, keeping up with anything that was, like, beyond playground level. I call it a hiatus. You may not call it a hiatus. I feel like there's not really a better word to describe what I was doing, because it wasn't like I was paying attention to anything necessarily. I was still playing the game, but wasn't paying attention to any, like, sort of meta. I wasn't really getting new cards. You know, just like I said, a pack here, a pack there, you know, something like that, if that even. And so this was sort of when that ended, and I was playing it religiously. I started collecting cards again. I started, like, trying to make new decks and all this other stuff. And I would end up joining an Amino that would change things again for me forever. It was called Yu-Gi-Oh! Multiverse RP, I believe is what it was called at the time. And I don't know if it's still up. It was a long time ago. I haven't really used Amino in a long time, but it was the last time that I was, like, actually, like, using Amino religiously. It still existed. Probably doesn't anymore. But in that amino, I met a couple of people that I would really form a strong friendship with. And a lot of you guys are probably thinking as I say this, oh, you're talking about B and Axel and Maria. And actually, I'm not. So, the group that I am currently, like, sort of in, I guess, quote unquote, in now, was not the first group that I had met on Amino and sort of, like, became very close with. So this group of people, with a very cliche name that we ended up calling ourselves eventually. Well, we'll get to that though. We started the whole, like group sort of thing for me, I guess. So these people that I met, who will remain nameless for the most part, unless I have to refer to them specifically, in which case I will refer to them as their current username at the time when I met them. So I would end up meeting this one particular person who I will be using the name of Yasu, Y-A-S-U, Yasu, for, and they ended up becoming sort of my best friend at the time, like on Amino and things like that. And we would talk all the time. I would help them build decks. I would, participate in role plays with them, and not like that, but like we would, join group chats and play Yu-Gi-Oh. We were very close. And eventually they would introduce me to another one of their friends, and then another, and another, and eventually we're like, well, we should make like a big group chat for all of us to talk in and everything, and we would become known as the Outsiders, quote unquote. Great book, shitty Yu-Gi-Oh group, as we'll come to find out. But yeah, we were having fun at the time. We were all friends. We played Yu-Gi-Oh together, and we would add new members, occasionally, that sort of thing, to keep the big group growing. And I feel like that was sort of like where our downfall began. Is if we had less people, I feel like the problems that I'm about to discuss either wouldn't have been as prevalent or maybe wouldn't have happened. So Yasu was a homosexual man, and obviously, they had never made any advancements towards me. This is not to say anything like that. Of course, I support the LGBTQ community, absolutely, wholeheartedly. Most of my friends are, somewhere in that spectrum of, LGBTQ plus and all that good stuff. So not to say anything negative about them for that reason, but I feel like that's relevant because they would end up dating a lot of other guys who weren't exactly the best people, and I would sort of have to step in every now and again. Again, we were very close, and I would have to say, listen, what you're doing isn't cool, this is something that I approve of, so that sort of thing, taking the big brother kind of role, and this would end up causing fights every now and again between myself and these guys and Yasu, and it was sort of this thing where I was like, damned if I did and damned if I didn't, which, sort of fractured the group a little bit, but eventually these people would come to move on, and we would move on with our lives and continue forward, until about it was July of 2018, I think, or 2019, one of the two, where that night we decided we needed a group leader, to keep everybody in line, because everybody was acting crazy and things like that, and some of them were exes with each other and they didn't get along and things, all this other stuff. It was a big bunch of drama, big pool of drama, a whole ton of it, which was a huge red flag. But, it is what it is. So, it was between me, and two other people, and one of them ended up backing out, being like, no, you know what, I actually don't want to do this. And so it was between me and this other person whose username at the time was Tiff. And Tiff and I were also very close. Tiff was a female, around my same age, and we were very close. And I had interest in this person, and that sort of thing. So I was like, regardless of whoever wins this whole leadership thing, I'm gonna, I'm gonna ask this girl out afterward. That's what I want to do. And so we dueled, and I lost. Admittedly, I was not very good at the time. I was still just casual enough to beat people who didn't really have super good knowledge of the game, but just competitive enough to be able to give people who didn't know what they were doing a run for their money, not necessarily win. I would go on to lose that duel and be second in command of the group, whatever, and I would eventually go on that same night to date this girl, and we would, sort of be like the co-captains. We were in a relationship, all that stuff, and we would sort of try to run the show in the group and everything. Eventually, we would make our own amino, because at the time, the multiverse amino was enforcing that all duels done in public chats needed to play link monsters, because this was when links were coming out. And again, I didn't like them. That's 3 times in a row that a new mechanic came out, and I didn't like it. And if you guys know anything about me, some of you know me personally will know, it is incredibly strange to think that I would not like link monsters, because that is my favorite summoning mechanic now besides synchro. It's second favorite, and it's the one I use the most commonly. So to think that I wouldn't like them was crazy, but I didn't. I was very against them because I was still playing a lot of older decks that didn't have link monsters. Like Blackwing was a big deck that I was playing. I was back on Blue Eyes, but with a more modern twist to it, and they just didn't have link monsters to really help them that much. At the time, the link pool was very small and very tailored to these newer decks, and the decks that could run these newer things had to splash engines, and I'm much more of a Yu-Gi-Oh! Purist, still to this day, even, where I like to play archetypes pure, except, in competitive decks. I've sort of broken away from all of that stigma, but we'll get to that. So we moved aminos, and created our own where we could do whatever. Moved over all my characters that I'd created, all of that stuff, and I was one of the leaders. It was me, Yasu, Tiff, and 2 of our other friends. That was the main 5 people in this group called the Outsiders. Think of it as it's me, Axel, Opal, B, Maria. That's the big 5 now. The big 5 back then was those guys. In my group anyway. And so eventually Yasu would go on to date this other guy, and this guy was asshole, as most of their relationships tended to be, very pushy and things like that, and would cause a lot of fights. And Yasu happened to really care for this one and did not want to, leave them, that sort of thing, even though we were they're being toxic, we can't have them here anymore. Caused a big fight where people took sides, and by this time in history, Tiff, who was still my current girlfriend at the time, had completely ghosted everybody. None of us had heard from her in weeks, and I was upset already because of that. And, everybody else was trying to pick sides, and I was seen as the enemy because I was siding with these people who, to the main group, sans myself and Tiff because she was gone, were outsiders to the outsiders. Like, they just come in recently, and they were like, listen, this person's being very toxic, and I was like, yes, and then, Yasu and their group were like, no, you guys just don't like this person, and it caused a big fight, and the amino just fell to ruin. Like, it fell to absolute ruin. We did not like each other anymore. Yasu and I, who had been very close, were now heated rivals, just exchanging words and, being very rude to one another. And, we were both leaders of this amino, and since neither of us could agree on anything, because anything that I would say, he would go against, and anything that he would say, I would go against, it just completely fell apart. And so we would splinter off into two different groups. The group that left with me to make a new amino, which immediately died, because I just didn't have the support. Most of the people in the Outsiders group were Yasu's friends that would become my friends, but were more loyal to them than they were me. That's not to say, I deserved to win the custody battle of the Outsiders or whatever, but that's just to say that's why the amino had ended up dying as quickly as it did. And so from that point on, Tiff came back. Later on, I ended up getting to speak to her again, brought her into this new amino, and, we were still trying to make things work, even though she'd been gone for so long. It's a lot of unnecessary stuff that I shouldn't really get into, because it's more or less personal to her life than it is to mine. But we were talking again, and then she ended up ghosting everyone yet again. And, at that point, I was willing to wait, but, the wait was unfortunately quite long. And we had followed each other on our global aminos by that point, and so it was just a matter of time to, it was just a matter of time before we either got into contact again or not. She never came back. I got tired of waiting. The group just fell apart. I don't know what Yasu was doing then. I don't know what Yasu is doing now. And a lot of this whole experience that I just spoke about may sound like that I was trying to demonize and speak ill of them, but that's not necessarily my intention. I don't have any form of hatred towards this person, towards any of the people involved in this, and if any of you guys do see this, I am very sorry for how I acted back then, and I'm very sorry for how I may have described you in this video, because I may still be a little bit bitter about that. We were all very close, and that was a time in my life where I could say truly that I was happy. Not to say that it now isn't that sort of same kind of thing. It's just back then I was very happy, and after that for a good while I was not. So if you guys, any of you guys do see this, do feel free to get into contact with me. I'd love to hear from you all again and just catch up. I'm again very sorry for how things ended and how I may have described you guys in this video, if you did at all find it offensive in any way. And of course, sorry to anybody who I may have offended by saying some of the things that I've said in this previous segment. This is all very personal to me, stuff that had happened. I would never speak ill of any of these people. It was just a clashing of ideologies, and we just so happened to not see eye to eye on most things. So moving on from that tumultuous period in my life, I was burnt out by that point. I'd been fighting with people so long. I had been, at odds with people who were my friends, and it just was not. It was not good for me mentally. And so what would end up happening later on is I would join the Multiverse Amino back yet again. Much later on, after a couple months had passed, and during that time, during all of that whole debacle, like in the Yu-Gi-Oh sense, I was still developing my skills. I was getting better at the game. I was playing more decks. This was actually around the time where I realized my love of the Rocket archetype, and started playing it more, and it became my favorite archetype to this day, and the one that I've played the most, I would say, throughout all of my time in Yu-Gi-Oh! As it would be one that would become synonymous with me now, and maybe even forever with my friends and people who know me. So on a less personal note, I guess, I was developing my skills as a duelist, as a Yu-Gi-Oh player, and had started to enjoy Link Monsters and what came with that. And I would end up joining the Amino back on a whim. I was like, man, one day I was like, man, I miss it. I don't miss the fighting. I don't miss I don't miss all of the bad stuff that came about because of what had happened, but I missed the companionship and the closeness of my friend group that we had before all of the infighting and things. And I got back on, and I was like, I'll see if I can try to capture lightning in a bottle again. That's probably a dramatic way to put it, but that was my thought process at the time. And so when I went back, I would scroll through some of the posts and things on there, and I noticed a post from somebody who was asking to test a deck. That same day, I had also just so happened to purchase a new structure deck. They wanted to test the structure deck. I wanted to test my new structure deck. I thought, this is a win-win. Why not? I'd never dueled over the internet with my physical cards before. It was always through a dueling simulator, Dueling Book, Wikipedia, YGO Pro, that sort of thing. And so I was like, yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. The person who wanted to test this structure deck would actually be one of my closest friends now. So shout out to Axel. Axel, if you remember this duel, kudos to you, because I don't imagine that you remember much about that time. This is before we were even really friends. But yeah, we tested structure decks, and that was my first foray into Amino again after being gone for that period of time. And it was mostly positive. And I would float around in different group chats and role plays and things like that and meet people. And I would meet somebody who would, again, change my life. And their name, at the time, on Amino, was Michael Colfax. And if you're watching this, man, I'm so sorry for the way things have been. If you see this video, please do reach out. I know things didn't end super great, as we'll get into, but you really did impact my life a lot. So, moving along, I met Michael, and we began to experiment with this idea. So I had always enjoyed limited Yu-Gi-Oh! I had always enjoyed playing limited Yu-Gi-Oh! And trying to make interesting decks out of just, this one archetype or just this limited pool of cards. And Michael came to me with the idea, what if we make a roleplay where we only can use cards that don't belong to a specific archetype? And I was like, whoa, that sounds really cool, you know? Um, like archetype series, whatever you want to call it, we ended up having to define the term for people. The definition of the term was any like cards that share a name and support each other where there is 5 or more of said card that shares the name, yada yada. And we would make this roleplay chat in Multiverse, the Multiverse amino. And it would sort of gain traction. We would get people from the amino to join and try out our style, and I would meet tons of cool people, tons of people who are probably watching this video right now, and I want to thank you guys so much for taking that jump with us at that period of time when you didn't know us from anyone else and you just wanted to try this crazy idea with us. This is where I met B, this is where I met Maria, this is where Axel and I finally became like good friends. This is where I met Scott, if you're watching this, Scott. This is where I met so many cool people that I would go on to become close friends with, and it was a ride. It really was. Eventually, we had to leave the Multiverse amino for whatever reason. I can't remember, honestly. We had to leave it. I think it had something to do with our chat, like being inactive, because the way we had structured our roleplay was that either me or Michael had to be present because we were the 2 admins of the chat to facilitate story plot relevant role plays. And so we said, hey, if you guys want to, while we're not around, do like a filler, quote unquote, filler arc, that sort of thing, where you guys just do whatever and we'll get to the story when one of us is around. And we would organize events and things for the chat, and it was still fun, but again, we would go like whole weeks sometimes without Michael or I being available, because at the time I was just getting started working and things at my new job, and I was trying to adjust to that, and Michael was also working, and we just didn't have as much time as we would have liked to. So eventually, after a certain period of time, I believe it was, our chat was to be disabled, and we had, a couple days to move over or whatever. They were disabling our chat. They gave us notice. They're like, even if you guys start being active again, there's no guarantee that it's gonna, not just dip back down. So, we're sorry. We know this is popular. We know you guys enjoy it, but we can't keep it up right now. We're trying not to have so many inactive chats, all that stuff, which was understandable. And we were a little mad, but, we ended up eventually making our own amino called Yu-Gi-Oh! Chronicles, which was what it was. It was called the roleplay. And we would go on there doing more events, and the whole amino was about Yu-Gi-Oh! Chronicles now. We didn't just have to, make little posts and have our own subsection where characters meant for that roleplay would go. It was just all Yu-Gi-Oh! Chronicles all the time. We would end up making other chats for regular duels and try to make other RPs later down the line, but that would fall apart and sort of fall flat, unfortunately, as every amino that I touch seems to die. At least ones that I'm a leader in, or a curator, or what have you. It was also around this time where B and I would become much closer and start speaking more frequently, and I had started playing D&D around that time with my friend, because I was still in high school, and so I would be able to, see most of my friends, and the local library was just really close. They had all the D&D supplies, and one of my friends was like, hey, I know how to DM. Do you want to play with me, my friends, because we need another person? And so I went. I started playing D&D, and so this would also somewhat change my life, because the advent of D&D has led to a lot of the things that you guys may know me for or know of me about to this day. So I would talk to B one night on a whim about just, I was like, I started playing D&D recently, it's a lot of fun. I'd love to play, make some sort of Yu-Gi-Oh! D&D campaign or something like that. I just don't know how I would do it. And B was like, well, have you seen this guy? He did one. And the person he was talking about was a channel that you guys probably know, that we've referenced before, that we talk about pretty frequently. Summoner Blue. If you guys don't know who that guy is, and you know who I am, again, he's a much bigger channel than me. I don't know. I don't think I can help you if you don't know who he is. But Summoner Blue was the first person that I had seen to do something like that, and I wanted to try it. So I got on Chronicles and I was like, hey guys, here, listen, this is my new harebrained scheme. This is what I want to do. I want to get 4 people. I want to do a Yu-Gi-Oh themed D&D campaign. I want to see how that works. I've got Tabletop Simulator, or not Tabletop Simulator, we get that much later on. I've got Roll20, set up. It's free. Let's just try it. I want to see what I can do. And so I would get B involved because, we originally had developed the idea. Axel ended up saying that they wanted to join as well, and Michael would want to join. And that was the only 3 that I would end up getting until Maria also wanted to join, and that was 4, and I was comfortable trying to start the game. We would end up moving to Discord because Amino's voice chat was just god-awful. And so we would eventually start making characters and things. I would homebrew a lot of the stuff. Michael ended up dropping out of the game, and we would go down to 3, and I was like, well, we've done all this work so far, let's just keep going, try to have our game. And we did. Later on down the line, we would add Opal to the group, and it was starting to feel like old times. It'd been a long time since I'd had the big group, and with these guys, it was really starting to feel like old times, minus the fighting, which was really great. So we would do that and play that campaign for a while, and we would become closer and, speak on a lot of things that we would want to do. I was that whole time honing my skills as a duelist and becoming much better, and playing this campaign let me learn about a lot of decks that I wouldn't have otherwise known about, and let me read cards that I otherwise might not have read, until they had come up in certain things, that kind of thing. It was an interesting time, and so we would do a GX-style campaign, and we were all on the island. It was a lot of fun. I DM'd it. And we would eventually go on to do many more campaigns of various other animes. We've spoken about Beyblade before on the channel on B's end. We've spoken about various little campaigns that we've done here and there. And, I don't think that would have been possible without the Yu-Gi-Oh! Amino or the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG as a whole. Honestly, I really don't. If it wasn't for Yu-Gi-Oh! And it wasn't for everything that comes along with Yu-Gi-Oh! And that Amino, I would not know my friends that I do right now. I have a couple friends that I know in real life, but we don't talk nearly as frequently. And if any of you guys are watching this, I love you. Austin, Ethan, you guys, I love you. But we don't talk as frequently as me and, like B, Axel, Opal, Maria do. So beyond that, I would not be a content creator. I would not be an internet personality, so to speak, if it wasn't for this game and these friends that I'd made. Because we had just started playing these games for fun, but we'd always talked about wanting to be like Blue, like Summoner Blue, make videos and streams about our games and things like that, and I didn't have the equipment. The laptop I was using, it would blue screen on me randomly. It was a hand-me-down laptop from my aunt, who had used it for school, and it was old. You know, it was probably almost as old as I was by that time, and it would blue screen on me frequently, and that's an exaggeration. Obviously, it wasn't as old as me, but it would blue screen frequently. It would be very slow. I couldn't run Tabletop Simulator, which is what we really wanted to play on. And that would go on for a while, where we would talk about that and things, and B would get a better setup later on to start doing YouTube a little bit before I did. And, you know, with my new job that I'm still currently working at, I was trying to save up money for these things, and I wanted to finance a laptop through, like, Walmart or something like that. And I kept getting denied for the credit, because my job is not exactly like, you know, a high-paying job. It's pretty good, and it gets me by, but you know, I don't make that much a year, honestly, in comparison to like what most people would expect from a person in a manager, like, quote-unquote position. So I kept getting denied for the credit because I wasn't making enough, and I had thought that I could finally do it through eBay, because they had approved my friend, who was also working at the store prior to this. Well, not that was also working in the store, working at the last store, I should say. We had kept in contact. I also made friends with a person at my previous job through Yu-Gi-Oh! And we still talk every now and again to this day as well. And so I wouldn't have made friends with him if it wasn't for Yu-Gi-Oh! So that's a little fun fact there. Not super relevant, because, you know, it didn't end up to like big life-changing events, but, you know, just a good friend that I met through a game that I like at a job. But they had approved him, and he was making around the same that I was, and so I attempted it again, and I didn't get approved, and I was like, man, what am I gonna do? You know, I need this laptop to be able to like make videos and stuff like I've been wanting to, and I thought I finally had it, and all this other stuff, and B, being the very generous man that he is, of course, you know, B, I collab with him all the time. You know, you might not know that side of him so much, but B is very generous, very giving human, one of the nicest people that I have ever met in my entire life, and I'm very lucky to know him. He was like, well, listen, I have a credit card. You know, I could do it. I could buy it for you, and you just pay me back in the same amount of payments that you would have had to pay if you had actually been able to finance it. And I was like, man, I don't know, you know, all this other stuff, and, you know, B was like, you know, I trust you, so let's make it happen. And so we did. B bought the laptop for me using his credit card. I'm still making payments on it to this day to him, and I would eventually be able to start making content, get Tabletop Simulator, and do all of these things that we had really wanted to do, and I wouldn't be able to do that without him, and I wouldn't have been able to have met him if it wasn't for Yu-Gi-Oh! Because that's how we first met, how we first bonded. It's been a surreal ride up to this point in my life, where this game has become such a huge thing, and I would not have met the wonderful people that I know today if not for this game and the experience that it's given me in my life. So at the end, the video, you know, sort of starting to wind down as we've reached the present day. I just want to thank everybody for this. I know 40 subs isn't very much, and, you know, I might be making a mountain out of a molehill here, you know, so to speak, but it's not even that. It's just getting to this point in my life would have never been possible if it wasn't for the people that I've met through Yu-Gi-Oh! And through, through all of these different outlets that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has given me to be able to reach people. I want to say thank you from the very bottom of my heart to everybody who's ever clicked on a Tag Force video, to everyone who's, subscribed to the channel, from everyone who's, any bit interested in me and my content moving forward, and especially to all of my friends who I speak with frequently on a daily basis. I've name dropped a lot of people in this video that I speak with and everything. But honestly, I would like to thank some people in particular for getting here. Of course, I'd love to thank B for giving me these ideas and giving me the outlet to communicate these ideas to people, where I play these weird tabletop games, and especially for taking over when I ended up getting burnt out and DMing. I can't thank you enough for everything that you've done for me so far in the short time that I've known you. 3 years doesn't, sounds like a lot, but really it feels like it's just yesterday that we met. I'd like to thank Axel and Opal for being there for all of it. Just making this experience more fun by just being there and having their unique takes on things. I'd like to thank Maria for being a constant source of positive energy to me and everyone else that's around her. I don't think that we would be able to keep going for as long as we have if it wasn't for her. She is the glue that holds this group together, and I don't care what anyone says. That's true. I'd like to thank Talon, who we don't speak about as frequently, but Talon is a very close friend of mine, and they've been a big influence on my life and getting better, not only at the game, but at being sort of a mature person. Whether you think that you have or not, Talon, you have. Having you in my life has made me much more mature, not just for your sake, but for my own. And so I would really love to thank you for that. I would love to thank Baby Seals for being our first fan of Endarp, and I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional. But I'd love to thank Baby Seals for being our first fan in Endarp. We would not be where we are without you. You made it worth it. That first night that we sat here on our computers playing a stupid little tabletop game, you were there, and you've been there ever since, and I can't thank you enough for that. You really helped us push past that those first session jitters. I'd like to thank Hikari, who's another person that we don't speak of as much. They've been on B's channel, not mine, but I'd like to thank Hikari as well. Honestly, it's just that you've sort of helped us form this appreciation for Rush Duels, and this appreciation for art in a way that we wouldn't have before. And I appreciate that, because now, being a much more art savvy human has made me kind of understand things about certain people that maybe I wouldn't have just by being able to view their work. And so I would like to thank everybody else who I didn't get to name specifically that's in our Discord. I'll link the Discord in the description box below. Thank you to all you guys who get in there and talk and participate every day. It really does just make everything so much more worth it for all of us involved, not just me, not just B, but everybody. So thank you all for that. And now, with all of my emotion and thank yous and whatnot out of the way, I'd like to announce my next sub goal, which we are actually quite close to getting to now as of recording this video. We're at 48 subs on my channel. I want to get to 60. 60 is the cap on the main deck for Yu-Gi-Oh! So I would like to get to 60, and if I get to 60, I'm going to do a Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel subscriber tournament. I will curate it. I will record it and put the matches out there for everybody to see. I don't know how many people I want to do yet. It depends on how many people end up being interested in actually participating. Minimum of 8, maximum of maybe 36, something like that. However many of you guys want to do it. I don't think we'll get to 36, but hey, you know, a man can dream, shoot for the stars, and all that. So if that's something you guys are interested in, do feel free to subscribe. I'll post a video at 60 subs, like detailing the rules of the tournament and everything on Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. So if you guys are interested, please subscribe. It's been a ride getting to 40 here. I know that it doesn't seem like that much, but to me it's a big accomplishment, and I couldn't have done it without all of the people that I've mentioned in this video. Even if I've had negative things to say about some people, they're part of it too. Honestly, no hate to anybody that I mentioned in this video. You guys have shaped me, whether it was for better or for worse, and I still have to thank you all for that. That being said, I hope that you guys did enjoy this video. I know it was a bit long, and some of the things I said may have not necessarily been Yu-Gi-Oh! Related, and I might have rambled a little bit, but that's just me telling my story, you know, in this sort of way. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect, but I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and if you've made it this far, thank you so very much for going on this ride with me, and I hope that you'll continue to go on this ride forward no matter what ends up happening later on in this channel's future. That all being said, I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.